Okay, thank you. Thank you all for coming. Tonight is our creative competition night, and we'll get underway in a bit here. First, a few announcements. Upcoming Friday night meetings. November 25th, next Friday, is Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. The clubhouse will be closed. We're going to put on an encore presentation of John Theobald. Not a lot of pretty pictures. It was our most attended and most watched lecture that the club has ever given. He has great street photography from all over the world, so that'll be next Friday. December 2nd, the Friday after that, is Joe Edelman, back again by popular demand, always a great speaker. That's going to be by Zoom, a Zoom presentation. He'll be talking on practical composition. December 9th, we're going to have a live presentation, a speaker who will be in the clubhouse here. It's Cleveland's own Gabe Wasilko, who is a landscape photographer. He has a website. We have it listed on our calendar page if you click on that date. And again, tremendous images. He's going to be talking all about landscape photography, equipment, techniques, and that'll be live in the clubhouse. And then December 16th, with our own Deb Zimmerman, Still Life Tabletop Workshop. Sorry, Deb, that was the only picture I could find. I thought you'd appreciate that. But yes, that is always popular. This is going to be live in the clubhouse. Come practice your macro. Deb will have all of her setups here, and that's always a very popular night. That's December 16th. Upcoming exhibits, Beechwood Public Library. The theme is reflections. Reflections in liquid, gas, metal, or other reflective materials. Pretty much anything you want to do as long as it involves a reflection. All the information is on our website under the competition pages, all the important dates and things you should know about, and the deadline for entries is December 28th. And unlike the other two exhibits, we've got it Shutter Score back and running. It'll explain that on the website. It'll be a lot easier to upload these and name them. Our next SIG meeting, December 1st. Everything you know about exposure is wrong. This has also been one of Dave Bush's popular talks that he's given a few years ago in the past and has updated it now for mirrorless cameras and whatnot. And he talks about a lot of the myths and whatnot of what you learn about exposure, and that should be a very, very interesting night. And that is Thursday night, December 1st, our SIG meeting. Cabin Fever Party, I'm going to keep repeating this over and over until you come. January 21st, it's a Saturday, so there's no excuse. Robbers Auction, prizes, food, it's like a potluck. There'll be more information coming, but I want you to save the date. Pixel Connection, Winter Sale and Demo Day, coming up Saturday, December 10th. CPS members, there are a charge for a few things unless you are a CPS member, and I had sent everyone out a link with a password that you could register for free. Rob Eric's camera equipment sale was extremely successful. We only have 1 or 2 items left. One of them is a very nice Nikkor 200 to 500 lens, which we have marked down now to $500. And there's also a 50 millimeter fixed lens and a speed light for $15. That works as well. Updated competition results. This includes not just the points, but the accumulated points, how we are, where you stand during the season. We finally got that back up to our website. It can be found on our current website on the competition page. And suggestions, feedback, any idea you have, email me at president@clevelandphoto.org. I just noticed tonight for the first time in 5 years, I've been a member for 5 years, there's a suggestion box out there. And I'm going to ask Mike Kafkas where the key is for that, because there are 1 or 2 things sitting in there that I am sure are from 5 years ago. There's still paper there. Do not put anything in that. Email me. That was back before the email days. Email me at that address. I will read them all and either say it's a good suggestion or delete them. Announcements, the last one is these Friday night meetings are all on our YouTube channel. There was a little confusion. When you go to our YouTube channel, which you can get through our website, just click on the YouTube icon. When you go to the YouTube channel, you'll see a bunch of ones up there, but click live on the top. Live are our Friday meetings too. That'll take you to all of that. So with that, while the judges are judging, let me get this off. Flip this around, and I have a little presentation on monitor calibration. Let us see if this all works here. Okay. Okay. Introduction to monitor calibration. Memorize this word, introduction. Tonight, I am not going to teach you monitor calibration. This is an introduction. This is 20 minutes while the judges are judging. You could not teach the thing there, but I am going to go into the concepts and what you do and why. And in the end, you might decide, because what you're always told is, monitor calibration is important. It's the key thing, and do that. You're going to even question whether you should even bother after the end of this. So it'll bring up a lot of questions, and we're going to try to get a speaker here to talk on monitor calibration so we could do a whole regular Friday talk. So this is just the introduction here, too. Okay. Now that I've lowered expectations, we'll start. Why calibrate your monitor? You calibrate your monitor so that images on your monitor will look the same when viewed on another calibrated monitor. And your images will also be printed with the correct colors. Okay. Now, what needs calibration on a monitor? There are three things. One is the color. The other is the brightness. And the third is usually color temperature. Now, color. How do we actually do this, and why do we do it? Now, here's the thing. Just follow along with me on this. Here is a picture. Actually, you see, before we do anything else, what you see here is different than what you see on the monitors and everything on the side as well. That's just one of the things. Remember, this image is the same. It is an image, a digital image. But whatever I play it on, it's going to look different on all of those things. So whatever monitor you're looking on, let me tell you, this is the correct image. So you get this image. The skin tones are correct in this image. The background is nice, not too much green. So this is the correct image. Now suppose your monitor at home is a bit too green, okay? And your picture looks like that. Now remember, if this is your monitor, I've accentuated this. When I say your monitor is a little too green, if you put this picture up, you're going to say, my monitor's green, but it's usually much, much more subtle. I'm exaggerating this to show you. So suppose your monitor is a little green, and you take this picture with your camera. You're out at the reenactment, you take it, you put it back, and you say, hey, this is a nice picture. I like the way he's looking out there. It's just a little greenish. And so what are you going to do? You're going to correct it so it looks perfect on your monitor. And usually the way we correct a color is kind of add a color that's complementary to it on the other side of the color wheel. So we'd add a little magenta to this. And so you'd add a little magenta until it looks correct. So we're back to our correct image. So you've gotten that image now, and you put it on your monitor, which is a little too green, but you don't know that, and you say, okay, I corrected it now. This looks perfect. So you have a perfect image on your monitor. But remember what you did to that image. You added magenta to it. If we were to take this and put this on someone else's monitor who's not too green, their monitor is just perfect, then the picture you send them is going to look all magenta. So you, wait, how'd that start out? Again, it was a perfect image. Your monitor was a bit green. You've corrected it, so you say, now I have a perfect image. But that perfect image is because you've added magenta. And when you give it to another monitor that's not too green, it's going to look like this. So, or now you're starting to see how this gets a bit complicated. So how do you calibrate your monitor? How do we know? And the answer is pretty easy. We input a known color into your monitor screen. And then we measure to see what color it really is showing on your monitor screen. Now to do that, you say, well, if my monitor's off, how am I going to know? And the answer is easy. If we go, and then we make adjustments so it's displayed correctly. Every color, we go to Photoshop here. If you take a red like this red has values. It doesn't matter what this looks like to me here. We know, here's RGB, is that here's 128 units of red, 0 of green, 0 of blue. And we know that the hue is set at 0, saturation 100%, brightness at 50%. These are numbers, so we know what those numbers are. So we're not going to take this color and put it into your monitor. We're going to put in a signal that is 128R, 0G, 0B. So in other words, we can quantify what this red is. Here are the numbers. So we take a color that has exactly those numbers and we put it into your monitor. So if a monitor is calibrated, this should look exactly like that. So the software you're using puts in 128 of red, 0 of green, 0 of blue. It knows what that should look like. And by the way, green, 0 of red, 128 of green, 0 of blue. Now, 128, it doesn't matter what that number is. If that number was more towards 200, it would be a brighter green. If it was 50 of green, it would be a dark green. But the bottom line is it's quantifiable. The device that you buy to calibrate your monitor is going to put in a color that it knows exactly. When it measures that color, it knows that it should measure for this color, and here's blue. So if it inputs 0 red, 0 green, 128 of blue, and then puts a measuring device there and measures it, and measures the color, it should get 0, 0, 128. If it doesn't, if it gets 0, 20 units of green, and 128 units of blue, then it knows, that green shouldn't be there because I inputted this. So how do you measure the color? The software you buy will put in a color like that red, green, or blue. It knows exactly what it put in. And then there's usually some kind of thing you hang over your monitor, which is a spectrograph. So it's not depending on your eyes. The spectrograph will actually read that color. You put it over. Usually what they do is it's a little color patch. And when the software starts to work, it'll have a little circle under there that'll be that color. Now the spectrograph reads that, and it says, okay, this color is 0, 128, 10, or something like that. It knows. So the software knows what color it put in. It knows all the numbers. It knows what color it's seeing from your monitor. And then, if the color was not displaying correctly on the monitor, the software either makes adjustments to your graphic card. It does this all behind the scenes. It says, there's 20 units of green in here, and this should be all blue, and it makes adjustment to the graphics card to not do that. Or, in some cases, it makes adjustments to the monitor itself. But this all goes behind the scene. So what you'll do is you'll just load the software, you hang that little thing over the screen, you run it, it just keeps putting different colors up on the screen and keeps measuring them and compares and keeps changing your computer so that every color it inputted there is reading exactly the same way. And usually you'll see some kind of graph like this. This is just the color space, and This is ideal. That is red off to the bottom right there, and it might show you where your monitor is. So your monitor might be showing red, but just a little bit more magenta just up here. And in the end, after it makes its adjustments, your monitor and what it should be will overlap. So those are just some of the things you see. You don't have to know this at all. It does it all automatically. Now, brightness. Brightness is another thing that has to be adjusted. Now, what do you set your monitor brightness to? To get used to the term, monitor brightness is measured in candelas per square meter, or candelas we call it. So when someone has set their monitor set to 100 or 200 candelas, that's what that's shorthand for, and you don't have to know what that is. New monitors come set at about 200 to 250 candelas. A Dell right out of the box, 250. For photography, 80 to 120 is recommended. So you could see right there,
Number 2 is pictorial, number 1 is creative.
oh, thank you. So you could see right there that if you just buy a computer out of the box, it's going to be bright as heck. And the reason for that is computers aren't used for photography. Most people buy computers to work on word processing, and they're in offices and whatnot. It's bright, so you need a bright screen. They're working on word processing documents, so that's what it's set at. But again, we work at the 80 to 120. Now, monitor brightness. Let's go through this again. Suppose your monitor is set for 100 brightness. So, if we take that and we give it to someone whose monitor is set for 200, it's going to seem too bright there. It's the same image. We send them the file, they put it on. Why? Because their monitor is set up twice as bright. So you're going to say, I made this perfect image. And you're going to send it in to someone, and they're going to say, oh, this image is okay, but it's really light. So, suppose your monitor is actually this bright. You send it to someone, and you get this picture. Or you take out of the camera, your monitor brightness is 200 because that's what it's set at. And you take a picture at the reenactment, and this is what it looks like. What are you going to do? You're going to say this picture's a little too bright. You're going to darken it a little. You're going to make it perfect. So now on your brightness 200 monitor, after you darken the image, it's perfect. And you're going to say, this picture I took is now perfect. But what if we take this file now and we put it back on the other monitor whose brightness was set at 100? It's going to look dark. And so now you see why, when the judges are saying these pictures are too light, or it looks light up there, it looks dark here, or whatnot, what's happening? It's all can be a mess. Now, in appearance then, a picture that's normal. If you look at it on a monitor set with a brightness of 80, it'll look dark. Brightness 120, it might look perfect. Brightness at 250, it'll look light. Same picture, it's going to look different. But here's where the key is. What are you going to do with each of these pictures? If your monitor is 80, you don't have 3 monitors. You have a monitor here. So you get this picture, and you're going to say, this picture is too dark. You're going to lighten it. What are you going to do with this picture? If this is your monitor, you're going to darken it. So same picture, you have different people doing different things. So here's how it looks. That image, which is normal, on a brightness 80 monitor, a brightness 120, and a brightness 250. When I say normal, I'm assuming that someone with a brightness of 120 worked on it. So I just have to start somewhere. So suppose someone with 120 made this picture. Okay? If you look at it on a monitor that's a brightness 80, it'll look dark. If you look at it on a monitor the brightness of 250, it'll look light. So remember we talked about what you're going to do? Now, here we're going to talk about printing. Your monitor, brightness 80, you're going to get this picture, no problem. Just lighten it a little, and it'll look perfect. And you lighten it a little. So what happens then when you lighten it? This is the way it looks. If you lighten it and then go to print will be too light. The one where it looked perfect, brightness 120, you're not going to do anything with that. You print, it might look perfect. The person here says, okay, no problem. I'm just going to darken this and then print it, and their print will look too dark. And that's why when people say, my prints are coming out too light or too dark and whatnot, same print. But what happens is, and because all these prints, too light and too dark, when the person sent them to the printer, it looked perfect on their monitor. They lightened this up till it looked like that. They darkened this up till it looked like that. And they say, I have a perfect image. And you send it to be printed or you print it yourself, and it's too light or too dark. That's what happens. Again, we measure. The program automatically puts in a standard amount of brightness. You tell it ahead of time. You tell the program, it says, what do you want me to set this monitor to? And you say 120 candelas. And it will work in the software, and it'll keep adjusting things until your monitor brightness is whatever you tell it to be. And the third is color temperature. Color temperature, again, as you remember, when we buy light bulbs, outdoors usually 6,500 for sunlight. Tungsten light is usually 300, or those warm golden hour is usually in there. Shade and whatnot is bluish again. But your monitor comes set from the factory at a certain color temperature level. Most monitors are set up around the 7,000. Again, that's because of office work too. But if your monitor is 6,500, so here is about what we usually set it at. That's usually sunlight. If your monitor is set to a color temperature of 3,500, your pictures will look a little warm or orangish. If your monitor is set for 7,500, they'll look a little bluish. And what will you do when you take a picture and you take this portrait out here? You'll say, oh, she looks great. Lighting is perfect and everything. It's just a little cool. And you'll adjust your color temperature. And you'll adjust it till it looks like that. But you know, we're going to say, what's going to happen then if you look on a monitor that's already set like that? Color temperature again, same thing. It automatically, you tell it what color temperature you want. I want my monitor set at 6,500, which is usually our standard. And then it will automatically put in a whole bunch of different color temperatures, measure, make the adjustments, and set it for you. Ambient light, let's throw in another variable. When you edit, you could have the perfectly calibrated monitor. Perfect, you've done everything right. But your monitor should be the brightest light source in the room. And here, any of you that have Photoshop or Lightroom, try this. Is in Photoshop or Lightroom, you have your image and you have a background to it. If you right-click on the background, you could change it to gray, middle gray, dark, light, and everything. Try changing your background from dark to light. That picture just briefly looked darker. There. And the reason is because your eyes now, all this bright, your pupils constrict. And your pupils constrict, and this looks darker. It isn't darker. We didn't do anything to the picture. The picture's identical. So now imagine that you are doing your editing in a bright room in front of a window. Your pictures are your monitor could be perfect, perfectly adjusted and calibrated, but with your eyes, with that window, your pictures are going to look, whoops, your pictures are going to look dark, and you're going to lighten them. Your monitor was calibrated perfectly. That wasn't the problem. So that's another factor to take into account. Now, congratulations, you have a calibrated monitor. Your images are going to look identical on other monitors. You know what I'm getting to. Except, because, and again, and I bring this, because people think, I calibrate my monitor, my problems are over. And you've seen already why that's not the case. But if you calibrate your monitor, with the right ambient light, everything is perfect. And so your picture should look perfect. on another monitor, except if the other monitor is not calibrated. If the person you're sending it to, their monitor is too green, your picture's going to look green. If the brightness of the other monitor is set differently, if they have it set to 200 candelas and you've made it on 120 perfectly just like you should, it's going to look too light. If the lighting conditions, if the person's looking at that in a dark room where the monitor is the only light source, or they're looking at it in a room that's totally lit by windows all over the place, your picture's going to look dark. Or let's throw in another thing to just make it really terrible. If the other monitor is using a different color space, if you're using Adobe RGB and the other monitor is in just regular RGB, sRGB, and for those of you who don't know color space, Adobe RGB shows a lot of colors. RGB, which is used mostly on the web, doesn't show some of those colors. So you might have rich blues and everything too that might not show up on the others, nothing to do with monitor calibration. So you ask, why did I go through all that work calibrating my monitor? And which is a really, really good question. And the answer, the only answer, and after this you have to figure out, is it worth calibrating? Your images will look correct on another calibrated monitor under similar lighting conditions. And you say, gee, that's a 1 in a million thing too. But business client, that's why monitors for business. If you're doing product photography or whatnot, and you're sending it to a client, you better believe their monitors are going to be calibrated, and yours should be too. So what you send them, when they look, that's what they've gotten. So that is critical in those areas. Judging, when you are here, our digital judging, you have to assume that the judges are using a calibrated monitor and you're looking under the right conditions. So that if you do the perfect image, like we did some of those things here, and you send it to the judge, and your monitor was too bright, and he's going to be looking at a dark image or whatnot, and so you could see there too. So it is worth for these kind of things. And your images will also print with the correct colors. We showed you with the color temperature and other things. If your monitor is too green and you correct it, you're going to say this image is perfect. And you send it off to Dodds to have it printed, and it comes back looking magenta-like, or the colors aren't accurate. You're going to say they screwed up. Well, that's not the case, really. With a calibrated monitor, you could assure that what you send them is, what you're going to usually get back, usually. But, it's the best word in photography. There's always the but. Printing, which is another issue for another day. We are not going to go into printing. Printed images too light and too dark. That might have nothing to do with the monitor calibration. As we showed before, it could be the monitor is too bright or not bright enough. In which case, if your prints are coming back too light, you might just need to change the brightness setting on your computer. Or it could be the type of paper you are printing on. Things that look perfect. We had that demonstration one night. If you print on a glossy paper, it looks a little bright. If you print on a matte paper, it'll look a little darker and whatnot too. There's a thing called soft proofing. None of this I'm going to get into, but it shows you that it is more complicated than just, if I have a calibrated monitor, all my problems will be over. And my last item is, how will your images look on Facebook? And this is a key thing. Now, you make a perfect image. You have a calibrated monitor, everything is done fine, you put a picture up on Facebook. Depends if the other monitor is color calibrated. If the person at the other end has, his is all green, yours is going to look green. Depends on the brightness setting of the other monitor. Your pictures might look light or dark and whatnot to them. Depends on the ambient light of the viewer. We showed that. If he's looking at a real bright room and everything, your pictures might look dark. And finally, when you if you've done yours in a color space like Adobe RGB, Facebook automatically converts that to RGB, so you might lose some of the colors. So what we get down to in all this, and is my last slide is always, I'm sorry, which is, I'm sorry because it is usually thought that monitor calibration is the be-all to end-all. I wanted tonight just to show you not only why it is important, but that it's more complicated than some of the other pitfalls, and at least this could help you start to standardize some of your work, at least for judging and whatnot. And it's always better to be calibrated. So are judges getting set there? Well, great. So let's take some. Let's see. Does anyone have any? Let me turn the lights up, and let's see if there's any. There's got to be a lot of. Let me get my. Any questions? Yes. Okay. Okay. Yes.
Every time we all see colors differently. So when you calibrate the monitor, you calibrate by a number or by what I see?
The question was, we all see colors differently. Do you calibrate the monitor by what you see or what it says? We should not see all colors differently. If someone is color blind, they see colors differently, but otherwise it is. But the other thing is let's say there is some variation in how we all see colors. In some way, you have to have a standardization. In other words, if you calibrate your monitor, if you see colors a bit different, there's nothing that could help that, because if your monitor is calibrated perfectly, and let's say you see everything a bit green, you're going to wind up adjusting your photos, and someone else on another calibrated monitor is going to say these pictures are off. So I'm not sure that that's that big a problem. We should see colors pretty much the same. If not, though, but what this is saying, though, when you calibrate, is on that, after I calibrate my monitor, that red is red. I could say that. Nothing to do with how I see that. That's red because the spectrograph measured it. When it goes to another person, and his monitor's calibrated, he's seeing exactly what I saw, and he can guarantee that it's red. That's really the only thing you have, too. So that's the only standard you have. Another question. What, Bill? Yeah.
Colors, I can understand adjusting, but the brightness, I have a question about that. Yes, it's going to look different depending on the ambient light, while I always get it at night, and I like the same. But if you pay attention to the level, kind of don't let your eye be tricked. Should you not be paying attention to the level adjustment more than you should what you're seeing on the screen?
The question involved, rather than brightness, should you be paying more attention to things like your levels adjustment on the screen? Do you mean levels adjustment in Photoshop or levels on the brightness on the...
In Photoshop, when you're actually going to be adjusting, I mean, I always adjust the black, I always adjust
Yes.
the whites.
Yes.
If I do that consistently,
Yes.
no matter what I'm seeing, it's being consistent.
Well, that's not true. The question is if you adjust correctly in Photoshop, using the histogram, using levels and whatnot, should things be fine? So if you have a photograph and you adjust by the histogram so that you get perfect blacks and perfect whites, the thing is, though, if you go in, so those are correct, but if you go into your monitor and turn up the brightness, that picture will look like that. The monitor is... What you're adjusting in Photoshop is not dependent on what you're seeing. If you do adjust your monitor brightness way up so your picture looks light, your histogram will not change.
Right, that's why I'm saying, pay attention to your adjustments in Photoshop, because those are consistent, and sometimes you have to ignore what your eyes see.
Right, so Bill's point, which is a correct one, if you adjust in Photoshop by the histogram so that you get perfect whites and perfect blacks, then that should be perfect. And his point is that even if you look on your monitor, say, this picture still looks too light, if the histogram shows that you have blacks and whites, then it's your monitor that it's the problem and not that. So yeah, that is another way to look at it, too. Because if your histogram is perfect, so you're getting blacks and whites, but your picture still looks too dark or too light, that is, again, your monitor. There's another question over here. Yeah, Jen.
If you're wearing glasses that reduce blue light or glare, is that another factor?
If you're wearing glasses that reduce blue light or glare, I don't know if that throws off the colors. But again, here's a case where if you're going to be using, and Bill's point was an excellent one, Bill is saying he edits not by looking at his screen, but by looking at the histogram. So, but almost all of us look to see, does this picture look good on a screen? And just like the thing, if we see colors differently, or if you're wearing certain glasses, this is why it pays to have your monitor calibrated. Because when you calibrate your monitor afterwards, those a red, green, and blue, you know is going to be red, green, and blue. If it looks a little bit different to you, then you know it's you, and not, or your glasses or something like that, and not there. Because if you're seeing colors a bit differently, or you're wearing glasses that change the color a little, and you adjust to have a perfect picture, it's not going to be for someone else. So the only way that you could know what the picture is, is perfect color-wise is by having the monitor calibrated. Otherwise, you're right, all these variables, if you're wearing glasses that take out a bit of the blue, then and someone is not doing that, you're going to make some adjustments and think the picture looks perfect, but someone else, it's not. But as you can see by this, calibration is only one thing. That's if everyone is calibrated and everyone is looking under the same viewing conditions. So there's a reason you should still do it, but you could see, what I want to do is lower expectations, because once people calibrate, then they come back and say, yeah, but my things are still printing too dark, or this, or so looks at my picture, and it's that there are many other factors too, so just to be aware of that. Is there another question over? Yeah. Are all the CPS judges required to have a calibrated computer? Could they? I was just saying, could the judges hear me back there? No. Okay, good. This is I had always assumed that it's not a requirement, but I always assumed that that was the case. And back when I was starting a few years of calibration, I asked a bunch of the judges, just randomly, what do you have your monitor brightness set to, or what is this and whatnot? And they laughed, a few of them laughed at me. So I just got it out of the box and that's it. And it is random. I only asked 2 judges, to be very, very honest too. It would be nice, I would assume that, remember, these aren't going to, when I talk about these, and I made the picture green and red, and those are obvious. These are usually more subtle things, again. But the judges they know how to look under, again, they're not looking in a bright room, they're looking under the right conditions. They know all of those kind of things as well. And again, if your monitor's not calibrated, you're still going to have nice everything's going to look good. It won't be off like a ton. But like I said, in business, yes. But if the monitor is off a little, it's not that the other person's going to be looking at a green picture or a blue picture, but it is a matter that it does make a difference. And I think probably what makes more of a difference is not so much the color calibration, but it's the viewing conditions as well. If you go home, try that. That's just open up some blinds in your window, or take your laptop and look in front of a window. All your pictures will look dark. And so just looking at it in a room with low ambient light is a big thing. So I think all of the judges are looking at it under good conditions. Yes. Any other questions? Yeah. If you buy a color calibration tool, could you only use it one time or with more than one monitor? No, you could use those forever, for decades and whatnot, because it's just a simple thing. You could use it on all your monitors, you could loan it to other people and whatnot, because all it is just some software that you load in, and it's just a spectrograph that you hang over and plug into your computer. So you can use this on basically anything. There's a whole bunch that make them as well to do that. But it's usually a one-time purchase, and because there's nothing really, nothing really big in it. Yeah, Joanne? The club had one that we were loaning out to members. Do we still have it? 2 things. One, probably, but I haven't looked at all the drawers yet and whatnot. There are things. I could tell you where the 2009 composition results are, and the suggestion. But the thing is, I will look around. But the problem is too is if it's that old, is this two things happen. Two things happen is one, this will last you 5 years. And the reason I say 5 years is because software improves and other things happen at that time as well. Not only does the software improve too, but also the software becomes outdated and sometimes is not able to be run on other operating systems too. But this is usually a one-time purchase as well. Any other questions? Yeah. Does it cost a lot? It's about, I think they're about 150, 100 to 150. You could check on Amazon. Or you could share it with someone. You find someone, because this is something certainly, if you know two other photographer friends or whatnot, and they're all looking for the same, just go in and get one and just pass it around too. Just all load the software. It's something, again, easily shareable. It's a pretty simple device. It's not anything dramatic. But doing it once, the other question comes up, how often do you calibrate? And you talk to people, again, you'll read articles. I have some people, they calibrate weekly, or they calibrate this, or they'll calibrate once a year. The real truth is, if you're doing heavy work, like if you're in production and whatnot too, those people calibrate, every few days and whatnot. If you're normal photographers like all of us are here, you probably need no more once every several months to do it. And that's just because there is a certain thing that you can measure. It's a more complicated measurement, and not all the software is able to do that, but it's called a delta E. And what a delta E does is it measures, since the last time you calibrated, how far out of calibration your monitor has gotten. And I like to know that, because if I'm calibrating 4 months later, or I used to calibrate every month, but I ran the delta E before and found out that really things were still perfectly calibrated. So I don't have to. And I found out that every 6 months, at 6 months, it was starting to slip just a little, and calibrate then. So actually, when you get down, you'll hear a lot of people say, oh, you should do this, you should do that, but there's an actual way to measure it. And in most monitors that you have nowadays, too, once, and even if you're a pretty heavy user, once every few months is probably sufficient to do that. The other question comes up, and this is something you just know, is laptops. Now, the laptops nowadays are a little bit better, but a lot of this applies to desktops. With laptops, just like some of the old plasma TVs and whatnot, when you notice that when you step a little bit from the side and looking at it, your image looks different or not as bright. And that's just a problem with the screens on laptops and how they're built, so that you could have a perfectly calibrated laptop. But again, if you're looking not straight on, it used to be that you couldn't really calibrate well a laptop. A lot of them do calibrate pretty well now too, and you could do decent work on that. In terms of actual client work or whatnot too, you'd really have to know what you're doing, but it's harder on a laptop, again, because there is that variability in terms of looking directly and being in front of the screen, but the principles still apply. So this is something that you could see is not the be-all to end-all. It doesn't solve all your problems too, but to do it once along the line like that makes a difference, especially brightness-wise. And you'll notice that anyone who prints on their own will have that problem sometimes of too light or too dark, or sometimes when you send your prints away, and that's usually the problem there. If your prints are too light or too dark, just a setting, if you're calibrating on your candelas, going from 80 to 100, or 120 down to whatever it is too, and your prints then will print fine. Mike?
The recommended color temperature setting, that's saying 6500.
Mike's question was, what's the recommended color temperature setting? You've seen 6500 or 5000. That's an interesting point, because other than, we talked about calibrating colors. That's an absolute. A red is a red, a blue is a blue, period. But then in terms of brightness or color temperature, There is no correct one for that. It's a matter of what everyone else is going to be setting theirs at. So the correct answer for what candelas do I set it at? Well, if you're setting it for 120 and the judge is 80, that's not going to help. So there's a usual standard if you Google what brightness should I set mine, and people will talk about the 80 to 120 range. And it's the same thing. Most of the equipment comes for calibration. They will suggest, and if you read online, they'll suggest 6500 because it's the closest to daylight. But then again, if you were setting it to 5000, and everyone, if I was king of the world today, and I say, as of this day forth, the standard color temperature for everything will be 5,000, and you go to jail if it's not. And everyone, 5,000, all the pictures are going to look identical on all the screens. In other words, it'll look fine, and everything will work fine. So the key is that there's no absolute in those answers of brightness or color temperature. It's what everyone else usually has that's set to. And 65, out of the box, the machines and the recommendation is usually 6,500 because of the sunlight thing as well. But again, if you were setting it to 5,000, if you were setting it to a client, and the client, you knew the client was set to 5,000, you'd be setting your monitor a 5,000 color temperature. Because the only goal is to have it look the same on the business end as it does on your end as well. Any other? Yeah.
One other thing, that if I have a they recommended that you turn your monitor on and let it warm up before you go ahead.
Yes, that's good point. Mike brought up the point that in some of the instructions for these, that you turn your monitor on and let it warm up for 5-10 minutes too. Yes, that is the instructions on these, because color is, when you first turn your monitor on, there is a certain thing before all the electronics and things get right, even in terms of brightness and whatnot, that it takes about a few minutes and 5 minutes or so to settle in. So yeah, on the newer devices, that has not changed. They recommend that you have that. And even some of these calibration tools will let you take into account ambient light as well. But the bottom line is just, it's most important, the colors, so that you see is what you know that the blue you're seeing is a true blue. And if it looks a little different to you, that's something wrong with the picture, not with your monitor. If you put a picture on, if you have a calibrated monitor, and you put a picture on that looks a little greenish, you know that picture is too greenish. It's not your monitor, it's too greenish, and you could correct it then. If your monitor's not calibrated and you put a picture on that's a little greenish, you don't know whether the picture is actually a little too green or your monitor is off. So it's one way of, that's one of the reasons for doing it. So again, my plea is something that you do. You could split it with a bunch of people. Mike's Color Monkey from years ago will still work. As long as the software works, it will do the job, because it's basically a really stupid job. It's putting in a color input. It's measuring it. It's telling you tell it what brightness it wants, 100 candelas, and it sets it to that too. So basically, these things will all work. So if you do it once, and this is even though people tell you, to do it weekly, daily, I do mine hourly, you'll find people that, but there is standards for these, and with that delta E, measuring, you find that really for the type of stuff that all of us do, every few months is fine. And it's a real simple procedure too. You just put it on, you put your computer in, just an ambient light room, and just run the program, and program takes a few minutes, and that's done. That's it. Over and done with too. So it's an easy thing to do, and doing it once just eliminates that at least one part of the problem. But I think it's just as important to understand these other things like viewing conditions. The thing of editing, that what I did there, that simple thing, if you do it in Photoshop or Lightroom at home, changing the background to the white and black, it is amazing. Your picture looks, that was perfect, looks dark. And that same effect happens if you're doing it in a room with a window in front of you as well. Your pictures will look dark. And how difficult it is someone was telling me a picture, they want to know why their picture didn't look good on the phone. They showed me their phone, for those of you at home, I'm holding up a phone. This is they show me the phone and say, look, it looks dark on here. Well, what do the phones do? The phones automatically adjust the brightness. I mean, if you're in this is constantly changing the brightness of the screen depending on the ambient light. So you do a picture, you have it on here, and it's a little bit, if it hasn't adjusted right or something too, it can look all over the place as well. So there are so many other variables. You can't correct all that. Usually, though, I am exaggerating to a certain bit that a picture you take that looks really nice, it's going to look nice on Facebook. It's going to look nice on these other things too. But as a photographer, it's important, I think, for everyone to understand these other variables because it goes a long way in your editing process. You could just imagine, forget the calibration actually of the monitor. If you have a monitor set for 250 brightness or you're doing your editing because it's a nice day today in your den with the window open as well too, that your pictures, even though they look perfect for you on that screen, could look a lot different for the judges or some other place too. So it's those kind of understanding things I think that really help. Yeah.
So, do printers need to be calibrated?
Oh, do printers need to be calibrated? That's the one for another day. No, do printers need to be? Yes, they do. Printers need, but not for the light and dark. Your monitor that's usually a problem with your monitor. But colors, they're calibrated not to make colors good. The printer calibration, and you hear about these printer profiles, which is what the companies use. You don't really have to use those. That's their translation for when you have like a blue on here. It wants to make sure that coming from your computer, that blue prints as a blue on the computer. So it's like a little translator thing because every printer is different. It might take that signal of 00128 for the blue, and this printer might make that a little bit greenish or something too. That's a printer thing, nothing to do with your monitor. So they use a profile which says whenever you get a signal that says 00128, that is blue. And this is how it should print. They are at their end, they do a lot of adjustments at there, just like they did. They print out things, nope, and they use a spectrogram the same way. They'll put in the 00128, which should be pure blue. They'll print that out, and then they take a spectrograph just like that, and they measure that color. And if it's not let's say it's 02128, they make the correction in the printer. So that's their thing. So if you have a printer, yes, should be calibrated. But when you send a picture out, you don't have to have those profiles unless you want, right. Those profiles translate it to their printer. You would have those profiles only to see if, and this is where that soft proofing came, which I won't go really into, is soft proofing is a way that you tell your computer, here's what this is going to be printed to. It's going to be printed on this paper by this printer. And then you press a button and your computer will show you on the monitor what that would look like. And you'll say, oh, this looks really light or something too. And that's because that paper makes it look like, and you can make adjustments on your screen to make it. Now, it might look crummy on your screen, but if you do that soft proof and you say on the soft proof it looks good, the soft proof is how it's going to look on that paper at the printer end. So that's a way for you to actually see what it's going to look at. But the printing thing, if you don't do your own printing, and you're sending it out, you can count on whatever colors are on your computer. They have their profile set that's what that printer will print. No, printing at home is actually not, once you kind of understand it, printing it, I've always printed my own things. It is not that difficult. Everyone wants to achieve what you see is what you get. And if you're always printing and your prints are always a little too dark, you just change your monitor brightness or something. And you'll find, though, you'll get it to where now it's perfect. And what a lot of people do when they do their own printing is, let's say this print, my printer always prints it, making it a little look too dull, and I have to brighten it up a little and increase the contrast. Is they have a little thing, is they have two files. One, their file for viewing, and the other is their file for printing. If you look at the file, the image that they're using for printing, you say, whoa, this looks too contrasty or whatnot. But they know on that printer, the printer they have at home, that one's going to print perfectly. So you find, since you're the only one doing the printing at home, you find what little tweaks you have to make it come out perfect, and then you're fine from there. It is not that difficult to do at home.
So are there recommended printers, like I have Epson?
The Epson is kind of Canon makes good ones too, but Epson is kind of been like the standard for the photo printers, and they do an excellent job. And you can do excellent printing at home as well. You know, it is made to sound a lot more difficult than it is, but you really, you know, once you learn how to do it, is pretty straightforward. How we doing? Do we have to do some more? Okay, we'll do some.
Why don't you take a break, they're compiling results, they should be just about ready.
Okay, so the judges are almost set. Do we have any more? I'll take more questions.
Thoughts on the BenQ monitor?
BenQ. What's the thoughts on a BenQ monitor? There are certain monitors that are high end. BenQ is one of them. BenQ is it. ISO is another one too. These are monitors made and used by the professionals, and they are highly very easy to color correct and whatnot. My thing on that is, if you're a professional and working, yeah, that's fine. However, it's not that critical. If you have a good Apple monitor, a Dell, you have Dell 27-inch, that is going to work perfectly. And I've had both, and I've had between the Dells just off the shelf too, and an ISO or whatnot, and it's not a big, it's not anything we're going to really notice. The picture's going to look kind of the same. It holds the professionals use them because it holds the calibration more and is a lot more accurate in the calibration as well. But in terms of the viewing and things too, and for the work that we all do, it's not that much of a difference.
I own a BenQ.
Yes, BenQ is, yeah, exactly.
And I was told, when I was in California, living in California, because I was in a club, and the professionals were viewing everything, judges would view everything with BenQ.
Well, but BenQ is, we're talking about these high-end monitors. Remember, as long as your monitor is color calibrated, the resolution of a monitor used to be 72 pixels an inch. Nowadays, and they still use that number, but nowadays the monitors are 90 pixels an inch. The BenQ monitors are 90 pixels an inch resolution. The Dells are 92 pixels an inch. A pixel's a pixel. The picture is not going to look, this is a guarantee, any different on the BenQ monitor as it is on the Dell monitor or any of the others. There is no, you cannot tell the difference, because that's not the reason it's a professional monitor. It's a professional monitor not for resolution or anything else. It's for other reasons. It holds its calibration well, its method of calibration. There are a number of reasons, that and ISO. So the thing here is it's an excellent monitor. It'll last you your lifetime, but you could do perfectly on the others. Yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask you if the graphics cards on all computers respond to calibration.
Good question.
Done in the card, isn't it?
The question was, do the graphics card respond to all of these things on every computer and whatnot? It's only the high end, the BenQs and the ISOs, that actually it'll adjust it on the monitor per se. On everyone else's, on our computers, it makes adjustments in the software of the graphic card. And I think if you get your computer, that's one of the most important things if you're working with Photoshop and others, to have a good graphics card. And the graphics cards, nowadays that are out there, almost all not just the high-end ones, but if you get a real decent one, when you get a new computer, they will respond to all that. The color monkeys, the spiders, the i1s, all of those too will work for most graphic cards and make the adjustments. Some monitors, there's a lot of variation. Some monitors, you could adjust the color on it. Like some of the Dell monitors, you could adjust the green and whatnot, and the program will tell you, adjust the green, press your green button here till it's a little more green, and it'll show you a thing to make it you have to line up. Others do it automatically in the graphics card as well. But most graphics cards nowadays think it will make that adjustment. That's my understanding. Yep, okay, I think if anyone wants to ask questions, they could always just grab me. Otherwise, I think we'll take a break before the judges come in, and thank you. Okay, if we could start to gather, we're going to bring the judges in and we'll get set to start our competition.
Green's on. I know you're friends, but let's not get ridiculous, right? I'm riding home with him anyway. Okay. Green, you're hot. Tap.
Green or hot,
Okay.
red or not.
And see, now it's green. That's hot. You can talk.
Texting, 1, 2, 3, testing.
Something.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get underway with the creative competition tonight, and here is Bill Keaton.
Anyway, welcome all. Thank you for coming to the creative competition. Where did time go? This is the last competition of this calendar year. So tonight it was a moderate amount of participation. We have a total of 50 prints, and the judges have agreed to comment on all 50. They won't break too many hearts, they promised. And with that, I'm going to, they're muttering when I said that. I'm going to let them stand up and introduce themselves.
Officially, I'm Glenn Petranik. All right. I say I've been here often enough, from presentations to judging. It's always a great place. I enjoy coming here, probably one of the more talented groups, if not the most talented group in the Cleveland area. So it's always a pleasure to be back and seeing everybody. People know I do sell my photography professionally at art shows, is what I've been doing with my time nowadays. Been going pretty good. COVID set us back, but once COVID was released, we're doing great again. So it's great to be here, and looking forward to it.
Can you hear me? I'm Steve Manchuk. I too have been a presenter here on several occasions. Actually, Glenn and I got our judging chops here back in the days of prints and film under the watchful eye of Ruth Morrison. And with her permission, I might add. I've been doing photography since I was a young child. This is the man who got me interested in photography through his father, who was an excellent photographer. And I've worked professionally for the man sitting on my left, Mike Demeter, when I did my professional photography years. So I do a little teaching now. I'm retired from my full-time job, but I was always interested in photography at a very young age. And back in 2000, when digital photography became somewhat affordable, Glenn and I took our show on the road, and we took some PowerPoints out there and showed people this new technology. It was met with mixed reviews.
We got
But
thrown
as you-
out of a few clubs.
But as you can see, we're here to stay, so, with our digital. Great to be here tonight.
Good evening, all. I'm Mike Demeter. Been a professional photographer in Lake County for many years. And been judging here a few times. It's always nice to come back. As Glenn was saying, the quality of the work was here is really what kind of draws me back. So interested to see work and talk about it a little bit. So I don't do professionally now. I have probably shied away from the weddings and the senior portraits and that type of thing a lot, which I did for a long time. And now I try to concentrate. I teach a digital class at Lake Erie College in Painesville. So that keeps me busy and keeps me kind of active and involved in the new software and so forth, which is always a good learning experience for me also. So I try to spend my time doing that, and also I love to travel photography. So I try to be on the road as much as I can, just certain places like I love Americana and the iconic things that are left from America, its past and so forth. So I enjoy Route 66 and this is down at Old Car City. And if I can mention the Michigan word to this group, I don't know how many Buckeyes here, but I was just up in the Upper Peninsula in October. So anyway, it's great to be here and look forward to critiquing some work.
Okay, I guess this is a cue to get started. I've enjoyed this. The kind of feathering around the hairline I thought was pretty interesting. Coming up usually from a white background too is a little different. Usually you see something like that in more of a darker background. The color of the face, it's not quite black and white, not quite full color, kind of muted. So nicely done.
Ink Smudge Portrait by Mike Kopkis, 21 points.
Kind of a rear view, literally a rear view of, looks like a very old piece of equipment. I'm going to say we're in a rail yard, is that correct? It's a very, very nondescript piece of equipment, but obviously yellow's the theme. You got yellow in the background, yellow in the foreground. I think from having all of the same colors is a neat theme. From a creative standpoint, there's just a few little things you can do to kind of make it a little bit quirkier. There's you can maybe brighten up the colors a little more saturation. You can tilt the camera. It's pretty static, and if you're trying to really make a big statement, is you can go bold on all counts and just skew the image as much as you want to bring up the kind of the excitement level.
Looking back, Bob Kowaleski, 18 points.
So, a couple things about this picture interested me. I think one was the positioning of the central subject, which was, I think, a little off-center, which lent it to a nice movement within the image. The kind of the movement of the colors around the background and so forth seemed to provide a nice movement in this picture for me, and along with the kind of galloping horse that carried along that theme. So a lot of movement. I did enjoy the colors in this, and again, the coloration, the tonalities. I think the horse was nicely rendered, and the off-center placement, I think, kept movement within very nicely.
Through the Secret Forest by Vicky Wirt, 23 points, second place.
Okay, this is kind of a humorous attempt here. It's a fun picture. Don't get me wrong. It's she's holding herself in a hand. Maybe it could have been done a little more better with the placement on the hand and make it almost look a little realistic. It looks like just more on the fingers and being supported by the palm. But still, you get the idea. And you know what? It's always good to have fun with your images.
Saving Little Connie by Fran Marino, 20 points.
I like the fact we have on the color wheel, you got your blues and your yellows. That's a good combination. And you got shapes, you got motion here. And now I think to take it to the next level, to really make it more than just a literal translation of this arrangement, is to again have some fun with as far as the composition, not making it as static. You can rotate it, skew it. You can take the colors and make them maybe the blue's a little brighter. You can even do a little bit of hazing or diffusion. There's a lot of things to do with this to make it a little less literal and make it maybe more abstract than it is presented here. So it's just things you can do to take it to the next level on your creativity.
The Nautilus by Bill Keaton, 21 points.
Well, I think technically, I would have to think this type of work is always a bit of a challenge. Very low light, movement, capturing the decisive moment at a place when the figure would probably pause. So technically, very sound. I like the little reflection that's coming off. And I would imagine that this particular situation was taken, where the light was totally red. So, I mean, the red is totally prominent in this, and I think it plays itself well. Maybe I would take a little bit of cropping off over the top just to kind of enhance the image just a little bit. But well done, technically sound, and I think that compositionally, I think it works nicely also.
Red Dancer by Susan Bestel, 21 points.
Kind of enjoyed the feel from this, from the softness, kind of a glow to this, and with the color palette as it is. Even though you can tell it's kind of an abstract type of image of this particular plant, whatever we have, for creative, it flows nicely.
Cactus in Technicolor by Marge Brady, 24 points, first place.
Now, in the creative competition, looking at this, I think this is an excellent starting point for what I think could be a very creative image. I think I would, judging it at face value, it's not in the realm of creative, but it has the makings for it. And I think that the upper half, which is the literal translation, is the part I would leave out. I would take that reflection and I would work it. You can do a lot of things with that to make that the actual image. The bird in flight, whether taking off or landing, is well captured, but I think it's the reflection that I'm finding the most to appreciate here. And it can be lightened up, it can be duplicated, mirror image. There's a lot of things to do to bring that really out as something very different.
Gull Mirage by Bob Kowaleski, 19 points.
I found this to be very interesting and also very mystical and very dreamlike. Got a lot of interesting things going on in here for me. I think the lighting that's kind of coming across in the back of the woods, I think really flowing toward the central subject is really displaying that. It's got a little bit of a rim light to it, which I think is appealing also. You know, there's a lot going on in here, and I sometimes wonder whether the attention is drawn enough to the subject. I guess what I'm saying is maybe I would have cropped a little bit off the left, maybe, to bring the subject a little bit more to prominence. But the tonalities and the placements and the work that went into this, I think is quite good. So maybe just cropping it a little bit off the left might have been a little suggestion for my part.
Raven Princess by Jackie Sayuski, 24 points, first place.
Great capture in time here. I've got some northern lights and the clouds and the image are just spectacular. And I kind of enjoyed there's a small building with the person in it. Really gives you a sense of scale and the light pouring out of the building as opposed to the light in the sky. It makes a interesting contrast with the person standing there.
We're going to take a break for a second to get the right picture up on the screen here.
Let's get reduced in size, Richard.
Yeah, it's in here. Let's see. Let's see if they were too big.
Of course, on my photo, it got stalled. I thought that's fine. You guys were like staring at it, not realizing that the control better, like, all right, what are, they're bashing my photo for some reason. It's like, okay, do I give them a 5? Do I give them a 6?
Little scoring. So they could take the distance. Bastards. Okay, do we pay an annual fee to get the guys up place for free? I pay an annual fee for these $50.
So right now
Is it worth it? I got the whole suite. But like I say, when this photo AI came out, that's a game changer. It's really impressive.
so the package that you got does have the
In fact, the AI is a standalone. You got to upgrade it as a standalone.
I think it's $60 to understand.
Yeah, I think so. I got it for free.
Oh,
Because I have everything else. But yeah, I mean, the noise reduction, I went across at Greenfield Village, so some things I'm shooting at ISO 400, some things I'm shooting at ISO 64, back and forth. And when I plug it in, yeah, it goes right through it, scans it, comes up with the noise reduction.
does it add any kind of contrast or any undue things
No.
that you don't like about it?
It doesn't change that. It just, what it does, though, it even also will go through as it scans the image, it'll look for faces, it'll optimize faces, it'll see if it needs sharpening, and if you want to resize, like, once you can make it larger, you have options at the bottom to make the image a larger size of the puzzle. It's like they took all the other things and packed into one.
That's why I get surprised that in Photoshop, the neural filters, there's some weird skin smoothing in that type of thing.
Okay, we will be able to see all of these images tonight. It's just at various points, we're going to have to put them in 9 or 10 at a time, so my apologies. So this one was commented on, and this is Northern Lights by Eric Wethington, 22 points, third place.
I think that's my first third place. Otherwise, I've not really scored that well this year. So it's like, yay.
A nice multi-exposure, and I think it's well placed too. I think there's a lot of good composition going on here. The reflection in the of the person at the bridge, or at the railing there, in the far distant, is perfectly placed in there. The bubbles make a nice pattern around the frame. Makes your eye move around. The brightness of the leaf is balanced by the dark area on the lower left. It's kind of a balance of masses, and it works very well. So it has a very cohesive look to it. Very well done.
An Orange Leaf, Blue Bubbles, and Me by Dave Saborik, 20 points.
Well, let's see. I love black and white, so I guess I'm a little biased to this. So but I'm also a fan of simplicity and finding what the central idea of a photograph is. And I certainly get that from the main figure in here with the painted face, and I like the selective colorization that was done on that. I think that works out very well. I get the feeling from the fellow playing the tambourine that's all part of the event, so that works out nicely too. And the tonalities work out nicely. It's kind of a high contrast image, so I think that's in its favor also. I guess the only thing that I struggled with a little bit without seeing it is, the inclusion of the fellow with the tambourine, whether it would be the photo would stand on its own without that. So that's my only thought about that. But in general, tonality is great. I like the high contrast, the selective colorization. Captured the event well.
Super Parade, Touch of Color by Gary Marich, 22 points, third place.
At first, the image confused me. This way to put it. I mean, the waterfall looks cool up there. Great viewpoint of it. But then it looks like the waterfall is reversed at the bottom, going the other way. And for a creative project, yeah, it's creative, but I'm having a hard time putting it together. If that makes sense. Actually, is it a reflection? Could be the way the rocks are going. It's hard to tell. And it's an interesting concept to it. And the reflection seems to work, but I think the distance between the falls itself with the rocks in the middle and the reflection, it doesn't hold the two together, in my humble opinion.
Handheld Waterfall Reflection by Michael Murray, 20 points.
I've done a few mirror image routines, and I appreciate this one very much. It has a kind of a playing card effect. Looking at it, has that kind of quality of a handful of cards. Very well done. I like the the tones are all kind of in the same family, very, very warm, and very symmetrical. And even though it's a vertical presentation, it has a very restful quality to it. Nicely done.
Auditorium Abstract by Vicky Wirt, 23 points, second place.
The black and white effect is interesting in this. I think, again, simplicity is always a big part of image capture to me, and I think there's just a lot of things to consider in this picture. Some things is, I think, a little bit difficult because they seem to be soft and out of focus. Don't know whether that was the photographer's intent. The kind of the movement, though, that comes between the figures seems to work pretty well. But again, to me, it's just the tonalities seem a little soft, as does some of the imagery. But there's definitely movement within the picture, which is keeps the viewer within there. But I just think, again, I think there's maybe just a little bit too much going on in here.
What Nightmares Are Made Of by Fran Marino, 19 points.
I enjoyed this image just from the look of all the different water drops. From what I'm gathering, it looks like a Scrabble game, Rage. But this is the word that's on there. And maybe that's how you felt after you took the picture. I don't know. But like, it's interesting look with the water droplets and the repetition as it gets smaller.
Rage Against the Red by Bill Keaton, 21 points.
We have I don't know if it's mother and daughter or father and son team here in aquatics. I think overall, looking at it, it's a very dark image, and I just to bring this image up to a viewable level, I would really try to take the brilliance level of this up, because I think it's striking. It just needs to be taken up, and as it being a literal presentation of this scene, I think there's a lot of things you can do to have some fun with it. But really, the first thing I would say is lighten it up so that we could truly appreciate what we're looking at here. But it's heavily in shadow, or in a dark presentation. But for in this category, I think there's a lot that can be done with this, and I've mentioned this in the past. You can do mirror image, you can do blurs, you can do a lot of things to make the image a little bit more than just what it is literally.
Going to Pieces by Belinda Prinz, 19 points.
A very striking image from the texture and the coloration of the foreground leading back into a vanishing point behind the figure, to the brilliance of the leaves, to the tonalities in the trees, choice of costume for the subject, the dancer, the lighting on the dancer, and so forth. I mean, the image works, the moss, all the tonalities really work and blend well together. And the pose, I think, is a striking pose for the dancer also. So, well done.
Autumn Leaves Dancing by Susan Bestel, 23 points, second place. We'll take a half-second break.
Present the images. In the judging room, I couldn't figure out why the angle that was taken from the girl actually looking up. Yeah. For first I thought I was looking down, but horizontal, not a vertical, but.
Okay, we should be all set.
All right. Nice, nice black and white here. I appreciate the look. I think we were looking up. I think it's well done from a perspective standpoint. Also, I'm kind of a heckler for straight lines, and I like the fact that the lines on the left and so forth are straight, and the stairwell going up in a repeating pattern of black shows up well against the white. I enjoyed it.
St. Augustine Lighthouse Stairs by Gary Merritt, 22 points, third place.
Another experimental multi-exposure I will take as I think there's a lot going on here that you can read into it. Time in a bottle. I hope I didn't miss that. But it's as from a visual play, it's just busy enough to be interesting and yet simple enough to read. So it does very well that way. I think sometimes when you have a composition perfectly centered, it tends to make it less dynamic. But in this case, it seems to work fine because the main image is cocked off center. I think that's what makes it work.
Time in a Bottle by Mike Kopkis, 22 points, third place.
Let's see. Technically, I think well done. The symmetry, I think, also is well presented. Tonality's good. I think the use of the cold blue sky, and I think even the way that it might have been printed is just, to mute the colors a little bit. So I think that works well for this image also. It's dynamic. The angle, you get that feeling of power and dignity from something like this. So I think it's a well designed and well thought out piece also.
Strong as Ever, Michael Murray, 21 points.
Interesting depiction of a portion of Cadillac Ranch out there in Amarillo, Texas. Compositionally works well as a horizontal. You got the cars kind of, once again, kind of fading from left to right, which works. Very high contrast. Like to have seen a little more of the color coming out there. If you've never been there, there's a lot of color in those cars. So I probably would have liked to have seen a little more of that. I like the fact that the black sky and the dark foreground, but I really think you do a little more getting the color to pop out of it.
Cadillac Ranch, Electric Wonderland by Melanie Plummer, 22 points, third place. And that concludes our creative, and in a second we will go on to pictorial.
Here we are at Blue Hen.
Oh, wait till he says go. He's setting up the photos. We good? Okay, now.
It's on.
Yeah.
It's on. Okay. Can definitely say I've been to this place a few times, different seasons. This is captured well. It's exposure is very well done. This is, you know, you have shadows, you have some hot spots, but at the upper portion that are handled very well. And as Blue Hen is probably not one of the fastest running waterfalls in the area, but this is probably one time where you actually got some action there. I think it's well captured, and it's as a pictorial in this setting. You know, this is all very devoid of any you know, trees, leaves, or it's all. This is strictly about rock and water, and it delivers. It does a nice job.
Blue Hen Falls by Dennis Wirt, 21 points.
Very symmetrical. The tonalities really seem to work nicely. Good vanishing point. Compositionally, the use of diagonal lines and vertical lines and curved lines. I mean, this picture to me is all about lines and tonality and symmetry. So I think it works out very well.
Huntington Skylight, Dennis Wirt, 22 points.
Great little fox kit. The operative word, of course, is cute, and you can't deny that. Really appreciate the lighting on this. Great soft side lighting. Maybe I'd like to see it maybe a little tighter. I think it's got a little too much around it, but one aspect of having this type of composition, he's little, and it makes him look little in the picture, so you can go either way.
Miss Foxy Pup by Bob Kowaleski, 24 points, first place.
Very simple, very much taking the background completely out of this. And when you have these very fine white hairs to deal with, it's a balancing act between that and the darker tones. This is captured very well. I could even go tighter on this for a composition. I think there's maybe more black area than necessary.
Milkweed by Marge Brady, 23 points, second place.
A lot of good colors, a lot of movement in this picture, good use of panning to work on the background and separate it from the car. The looks tack sharp and for most situations, I think, in the shot. It captures pictorially the event nicely. And again, I think the selling point to this shot is the creative use of panning to make the background just to come alive.
IndyCar by Rich Foley, 22 points.
I really enjoyed this image. It's got a beautiful mood and feel to it. From the the mosses hanging on the cypress trees. There's a bird flying through it, which is harder to see unless you're close up to it. But once you look at it, the whole thing comes together. It's really a beautiful piece.
Cato Lake 1 by Joanne Damian, 24 points, first place.
Very nicely skewed composition. Taking this this tack with the composition by having the trees, the upper 2/3 of the image, kind of pulling off at an angle, going off into the distance. It's very nice. It puts enough imbalance in the image to make you move up from the bottom and around the upper portion. So it's very nicely done that way. As much as I enjoy that, I almost wish there was another little element in the lower right to just anchor it, because it's just a lot of, for balance. There'd be a nice something down there just to anchor the whole image, but very well done.
Cato Lake 2 by Joanne Damian, 21 points.
There was a duck down there, but I crossed it out.
Thank you.
Because you knew who the judges were?
Excuse me? I think this also was a nice capture. You get a really feel of springtime. I think I would have maybe liked to say that it was cropped nicely, placed nicely. You have a lot of nice compositional elements going on in here. The only thing that kind of I would like to see maybe a little bit more vibrance in the pinks and the whites in the tree. I guess I kind of used to seeing what and getting a feel for what that would look like in the springtime, and it just seems a bit muted to me, that's all. But that's about the only thing that I think might enhance this work just a bit.
Cherry Tree by Dave Saborik, 20 points. We're going to take 30 seconds. We just have to load these 9 at a time, so I'm just going to load the next 9. All set now.
Okay, excuse me. Beautiful rendition of this flower here. The background's nicely muted, so it pops right out. Colors are great, good sharpness. Some of the sharpness falls off a little bit around the very edges of the petals. It's very minor, but all in all, it's a nice rendition of this.
Frost on Black Eyed Susan by Dave Saborik, 20 points.
I'm glad I got this one because it was a tough one to judge because the upper portion of the image is gone, and it makes the image look like it's easily cut in half. So since there's nothing up there to contribute to the image, I don't know how much it adds to it. This is a tough one because of the atmospheric conditions at the time. So I'm not sure how I feel about having half of the image with really nothing in there to contribute. But you can't unceremoniously cut off the telephone pole. So there's some compositional tension here that needs to be addressed. I think there's some interesting image here, but having the upper portion lose all its detail leaves us with a lot of negative space that I think has to be dealt with.
Mystery Fog by Michael Murray, 21 points.
I think the mood that's set in this particular shot works out very nicely. The angle that it's approached, a low angle in the foreground, works nicely. Also, the kind of the soft mood over the water works out well. The trees. I would have to think the only thing that is a little disconcerting to me is kind of the way that the lighthouse kind of falls off. It's, to me, I think if we worked on that distortion a little bit, possibly, that would have made the shot a little stronger for me. But the mood set, the the low angle, again, which was shot, the inclusion of the rocks, soft water, works out nicely. Even the lighthouse being lit is very good, but I just, again, for me, I work on my perspective a little bit, and I think maybe just correcting that lighthouse, in my mind, would have made it a little bit stronger shot.
Marblehead Lighthouse by Rick Bills, 23 points, second place.
Yeah, nice, pleasing scene overall. The water flowing underneath the tree. You've got the angle of the tree, which kind of anchors you into the picture. Obviously you're looking at a little bit well past peak in the fall. Water's pleasing. The slow shutter worked. You've still got some detail in it. If anything, if I would darken down the roundish rock in the lower left corner, has a tendency to drag my eye down there. But other than that, nice job.
Bedford Falls by Rick Bills, 20 points.
Take the scissors, Sasha. Take your scissors. All right, contrary to what we were told, there's no food being served tonight after the competition. I really didn't know how to judge this thing. I was like, oh my gosh. But I'm reading from a pictorial standpoint, you have captured a moment that is, in our everyday. The lighting is very interesting. When we have our subject is almost spotlit, or it's just some treatment in the post. I don't know that did that, but from a artistic standpoint and judging it, other than the merits of did I get the grill? You got it. You nailed it.
Chicken on the Barbie, Eric Wethington, 20 points.
That was actually light coming through a tree. Yeah, that was underneath the.
In camera.
I just want sauced or rub.
I think
I think we're talking food up here.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Okay.
Back to pictures.
Let's see. The use of a vertical, I think, is interesting here. Again, the contrast between the beautiful trees and the red farmhouse on the bottom, I think, and a little bit of inclusion of the foreground. I almost could have stopped at the top of the trees, to tell you the truth. I just don't know whether, the wispy clouds certainly are nice, but how much do you want to include in a shot, and what is your central theme in this particular shot? So, again, I like the diagonals formed by the trees going up the mountain. I like the farmhouse placement down there, foreground. I just don't know whether we're including a little bit too much on the top. That's just a personal taste.
Somewhere on the Fjords of Norway by Eric Wethington, 22 points.
All right, getting more cuteness tonight. Okay, this I'm going to assume is the baby gorilla from the zoo, whose name I can't pronounce, but very, very nice capture. I mean, regardless of where, when, what, this is a great capture of the baby gorilla in the mother's arm. Detail's great. I love the soft looking in the strands and the hair and so forth. And as you can tell, the little fellow's really comfortable and secure, but he's still looking up at you, wondering what's going on. Really nice shot.
I'm Safe by Belinda Prince, 24 points, first place.
Judges agree. As Yogi Berra once said, deja vu all over again. So we're back. Now we have the full color rendering. To be fair, the color rendering makes the image a little easier to process. Black and white there was a lot of very tiny details in high contrast that made the image almost too confusing to absorb. This one simplifies it. I also agree, though, from the previous one, that the gentleman in the background is a secondary point of interest, and I'm not sure if it's even necessary. Because I think that the colorful garb and the facial expression of the primary subject really is the whole shot. So I think I would give that person more prominence in the composition.
Super Parade by Gary, excuse me, Gary Marich, 21 points.
This one also captured my attention. I believe so many good elements to this, and technically a little bit challenging also. Sometimes even with propeller blades, for the shutter speeds that are used, I see so many that look like they're just frozen in time, and you get no feeling of movement. So I did like the use of maybe a little bit of a slower shutter speed. Of course, propellers are working pretty quickly, but it gives a feeling of motion and movement in the blades, which I thought captured my attention. Sky has nice tonalities to it. For me, there might be a little bit too much over the top. I might have cropped that down just a touch. The tack sharpness, I looked closely at the pilot and so forth in the cockpit. That's sharp. So technically, it's a nice sound print, and I think well done.
P-51 by Richard Foley, 23 points, second place. And we're just going to load our next 9 pictures here. Okay.
I think this is taken at the Amazon test facility, how we can get the packages delivered even faster. It's great capture. There's all the flames coming out. I mean, out of the exhaust pipes, and of course the jet engine in the back. Showing off before this thing probably takes down the track. It's very, very nicely captured there. I think I'd like to see almost a little more color saturation coming out of the flames, and the truck itself. I think you could do that and pop it even a little bit more from the image.
This is Shockwave by Rich Foley, 22 points.
My first impression of it, after you get past the fact that it's well exposed, it's in focus. In fact, everything is captured very well here in detail. Processing it though as an image with the garb, the traditional historical garb, and all that. It's a very static image, and in a way it's a throwback to how images were taken. That they were very posed and static, and they were flat, just like this, and everything was in perfect registration, focus, and all that. To that end, pictorially, to make it a period piece, I would like to have seen this maybe taken down to a very basic image, black and white, a little bit of toning, and make it a period piece, because it really has that look. But in full color, it's not, because for that time, this would have been a black and white capture at best. So as far as it presents right now, it's a modern depiction of an earlier time. But I would like to see it carried to that next level.
Civil War Camp Followers by Susan Vestal, 21 points.
So when you have red against black, it usually is a very strong contrast of color. You have the beak and the black background and the feathering and so forth, I think work well. The eye is, I remember it being tack sharp. The whole picture is technically sound. Nice curvature for composition. So I think the piece works well. It looks like there was a little attempt maybe in the lower right-hand corner to do a little bit of vignetting. I'm not quite sure, or whether that was just light fall off. That keeps the viewer's eye within there too. So again, movement in the picture nicely, contrast of the color. So it's well done.
Red-billed hornbill by Marge Brady, 23 points, second place.
It's really an awesome rendition of this moth. I mean, everything about it is tack sharp. The details are great. I even appreciate the fact that this thing's centered. I think this actually works with this type of image. And one thing of detail that's impressive is the fact that you don't lose the antennae in the background. You have enough separation between the actual darkness and the antennae and the deep black of the background. You know, it's so perfect. You almost wonder if there was a needle through the middle of the tag on it. I mean, it's really that good.
Miller Preserved Butterfly by Melanie Plummer, 24 points, first place.
Yeah. I'm glad I got this one because you know, this is a tried and true still life. You know, you take something very simple, you arrange it and light it thoughtfully, and certainly this is done that way. Because it is perfectly centered, it only slightly suffers from being very static. So I'm not super critical of that. I'm almost wondering if it doesn't need to be rectangular, if this could be a perfectly square rendering. Just to get rid of a little bit of the excess on either side. Other than that, I think it's technically very well done.
Pomegranates by Melanie Plummer, 22 points.
Well, this certainly has an interesting feel to it, and it comes out especially in the facial expression on the gator. It really does kind of grab me. And I like the tonality again. I kind of talk about tonalities tonight, which I think are very pleasing to the eye. The diagonal line going back into the top left down to the center works out very nicely. And there's just the reflection, I think, works out nicely in this particular shot too. It's, I hate to call it monochromatic, but it really tends toward that, except for maybe inside the gator's mouth and so forth. But there's a lot of nice elements to this. It's very technically sound, sharp, and I think well done.
Smiley by Fran Marino, 21 points.
It's a rather simple composition with some really nice textures. You pick up a lot of the texture and detail, the rust, especially on the gear and the wheel and so forth. Let's get a little bit on the static side. You know, I'd almost like to see it tilted a little bit to put the two round things on more of a diagonal, and I think that would give it a bit more strength.
Rusty Gears by Mike Kopkis, 19 points.
A very contrasty day for lighting. Really brings the colors out. It pop quite. These reds and greens are just highly saturated. Compositionally, it seems like it's cropped unceremoniously on the left and right. It's a little tight where it just loses some breathing room. Even in the foreground, to have the grass just cropped very tightly, it just seems like it needs a little more space to appreciate. But it's very well captured as far as the lighting. Usually very high sun and open sky makes for very contrasty images, but this holds up very well.
The Old Homestead by Dennis Wirt, 20 points.
Well thought out still life. The subject matter and the choice of placement works out nicely, I believe, including the tabletop it's set on. So technically very sound, I think lit nicely, soft lighting. Again, maybe again, just cropping over the top might be, maybe making the image just a little bit tighter might be worthwhile. And again, I'm just looking at the bottom also as far as where I'd like to see that table cut a little bit, but I think including the legs is necessary for balance. But well thought out, well lit, and a nice still life.
Instrumentally Sound by Vicky Wirt, 22 points. We're going to do our last quick load here.
One last image.
Yes.
Did you think it needed the legs on this? Yeah.
And we're set.
Great image of this fellow. Love the expression. The details is phenomenal. You can count the hairs in the beard and the outfit and so forth, lighting. I just thought there was an exceptional job for this portrait.
Ren Fair Dude by Bill Keaton, 23 points, second place. And that concludes our competition for the night. We thank you all for coming.